Today on the LowDOWN, a Down Syndrome podcast, Dr. Brian Chicoine gives us the lowdown on optimizing physical and mental health for adults with Down syndrome. Over to you, Hannah and Marla.
Thank you, Jody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the LowDOWN podcast. My name is Hannah, and I'm the Senior Occupational Therapist at the Down Syndrome Resource Foundation. With me today is my awesome co-host, Marla, who is a speech-language pathologist at the DSRF. Hi, Marla. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Good, good. So our topic today is focusing on optimizing physical and mental health in adults. Some of our listeners may not be aware, but the DSRF offers some amazing adult programs that help them build skills for independent living. And in working with our adults, we can often notice a change in their ability to learn, their behavior, or even their level of social engagement. And one thing that is clear to us as clinicians is that health management remains a central part of the care that adults with DS need, much like when they're kids. However, the health concerns themselves are different at this age, much as they are for the rest of the population. So today we have the extreme pleasure of getting the lowdown on adult health from Dr. Brian Chicoine, who lives and works in the state of Illinois in the US.
And Dr. Chicoine has provided medical care for adults with developmental disabilities for more than 20 years and has written extensively on caring for adults with Down syndrome, which makes him perfect for this topic. In addition to his duties at the Adult Down Syndrome Center, Dr. Chicoine serves as a faculty member at the Family Medicine Residency Program at Advocate Lutheran General Hospital down in Illinois. And he graduated from Loyola University in the Stritch School of Medicine and completed his family medicine residency at Lutheran General Hospital.
Hi there, Dr. Chicoine. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you at the lowdown.
It is.
We're looking forward to chatting about the medical care of adults with Down syndrome today. And it is an area of healthcare that has seen a huge change in the last 20 to 30 years. Before we get into the seriousness of that topic, we have some fun 5 secret questions for you so that our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Great. All right, so question number 1, what are you currently reading?
What am I currently reading? Well, it's going to be boring, but it's COVID-19 everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same for all of us, I think. Yeah.
Unfortunately, not much else at the moment.
Yeah, we're definitely living at an uncertain time right now. All right, so question number 2, what is your favorite breakfast food?
My favorite breakfast food is an omelet.
Oh, excellent. Good choice, yeah. All right.
With lots of veggies.
Of course,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Mushroom, spinach, all the works. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so question number 3, what is a must-see site for, and are you in the Chicago area of Illinois or somewhere?
We're a Chicago suburb, correct.
Perfect. So for a tourist, I've been to Chicago a couple of times and I love the city, but for somebody who's never been there before, what's a must-see tourist site for somebody visiting Chicago?
So I suggest going to Millennium Park, which is on Michigan Avenue, right near the lake, and then you can walk right over to the lake and enjoy that as well. That's
Fantastic.
our favorite.
That is your Michigan.
Nice outside.
Yeah, what do they call Michigan Avenue again? It's like has a nickname.
Magnificent Mile.
Magnificent Mile. That's awesome. All right. So our next question. You are, a renowned person in your profession, and I'm sure you do plenty of conferences all over the world. Do you have a pre-conference ritual to kind of get you amped up and ready to go?
There's a question I've never been asked before.
Perfect.
No, mostly my ritual, like we did today. Once it's all about making sure the sound in the video is working.
Yes.
Everything after that is just easy.
Yeah, all the technical things. Yeah. Okay, and our last question, and it kind of works for the times that we're living in at the moment. How do you de-stress after a long day?
So I'm an exerciser, so I like to lift weights, do calisthenics. We have elliptical and a bike in the basement, so that's what I do mostly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for kind of indulging us in that. It was really kind of fun to get to know our podcast guests that way as well. So Dr. Chicoine, Marla did a wonderful introduction for you earlier, but can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your professional journey?
Sure, please. So I'm a family physician by training. I trained here at Advocate Lutheran General, where I'm now where I work. And then I practice in a small town in the northwest corner of Illinois, which a lot of my patients were dairy farmers and other similar occupations. And two 16-bed residential facilities opened when I was there, and I became their medical director. And then when I came back to join the faculty here at the hospital, it was about the time our local parent group called the National Association for Down Syndrome came to the hospital asking to start a clinic for adults. And so I had the most interest, or I had the most experience having worked with those 32 people, and I had interest. And as the new faculty, I had the least on my plate. So I eagerly grabbed that opportunity, and we started 2 mornings a month, and now it's very full-time. We have 2 physicians, a full-time nurse practitioner, and we've seen over 6,000 adolescents and adults with Down syndrome since we opened in 1992.
Wow.
And we have about 7,000 patient encounters a year. So it's a busy place, inpatient, outpatient, nursing home, group homes, etc.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you've become one of the world's leading experts on medical issues for individuals with Down syndrome, particularly adults with Down syndrome. What is it about this population in particular that made you want to specialize in it?
Well, it's a wonderful group of people, which is makes the day a lot of fun. I think that the thing that's been so interesting in the course of since the clinic opened in 1992 was that really the life expectancy when I graduated from a medical school of people with Down syndrome was about less than 30. Now it's about 60, and I don't take credit for it, but it's been a very interesting opportunity to participate in helping a population double their life expectancy in the course of my career, which is I don't know how many providers can say that the patients they serve had that happened to them. And again, I don't take credit for it, but it's been an incredible opportunity to learn and how can we, I always say that when we started the clinic, healthcare was about something we did for people with Down syndrome, and now very much we try to make it something we do with people with Down syndrome, and including them in the process. And that's just been so exciting. It's such an interesting group of people that are eager to learn and to take care of themselves if given the right tools.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if I'm not wrong, you've been really heavily involved in developing those updated adult healthcare guidelines for adults with Down syndrome. I have been waiting to get my hands on those. I've been checking your website. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
How would you say, you mentioned that healthcare is not something you do for adults, but now it's something you do with adults. And so what does it look like when you get to involve somebody in healthcare in that way?
Sure. So I think that the key is, our sense now is not if we should include people with Down syndrome in promoting their health. It's how, and how can we best do that. So I really look at some of the not universal, but some of the common characteristics of people with Down syndrome. One is something our former social worker Dr. McGuire described as the groove, tendency to do things repetitiously and the same. So how can we build that into a schedule so that a lot of our individuals we see, once you get that into their schedule, they're going to do it much more dogmatically, if you will, than the rest of us. Key is to make it a healthy groove. So rather than a groove of fast food, junk food, make it a groove of exercise and healthy eating. And once people get started on that, they often do a very good job. And so, that would just be one example of you. Another example would be, we know that people with Down syndrome, by and large, learn better visually rather than auditorily. So we've really worked on developing a lot of visual aids, if you will, both on paper, but also videos. It's amazing that so many people with Down syndrome almost have a videographic memory where they can just memorize a video, if you will.
Yeah.
And so the video seems to be such a natural way for people to learn. And we've had some good success with doing that. And one of the things, one of our real interests is that there's a model of learning called self-modeling. And what that is where the individual themselves is the one that's on the video displaying the healthy behavior. Now it's, in the States here, if there are somewhere between 220 and 300,000 people with Down syndrome, it's clearly not in our budget to make 300,000 versions of every video. But the second best would be peer modeling. And so all the actors and actresses in our health education videos have Down syndrome. And that's also been a very interesting learning opportunity, not only for us, but for the individuals. And it's so amazing to watch. You turn one of those videos on during an office visit when you're trying to show somebody, trying to encourage them to do a healthy behavior. And it's so amazing to watch, they're sort of half listening to me that video comes on with a person with Down syndrome, and it's got their attention. So, we know where I stand in the pecking order of importance of health education.
That's a really cool project. Is that an open access project that families at home could look at, sort of your stock of health promotion videos?
Yeah,
we to access that.
Yeah, there is actually. We have a resource library. It's online. It's all free. It's adscresources.advocatehealth.com. I think I can never remember. We can get that to you. So it's a resource library, and the way it's set up, it's sort of three areas, or three columns, if you will, or three focuses. One is on the focus is on education material for people with Down syndrome, and that's heavily video and visual. And then it's resources for families and caregivers, and then resources for healthcare professionals.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I could just picture families that we work with sort of making their own video responses to the video peer modeling that they've then watched, because we find that is a really motivating thing. Like, you've seen this video, now you get to make your own video of you doing that thing, and then they can have their self-generated video. That's a motivation for them doing the right thing, kind of thing. That's really fantastic.
I think that is a great idea, and we've had some good success. We don't put these on the webpage or the resource library, but we've had some good success with people doing their own videos for different things. And so the may only be a 3 to 5 minute or less video where the person just watches that every morning, and it's such a good reinforcer for whatever it is that you're trying to encourage them to do. And those are some things that people can make very easily at home, with technology.
Yeah, with the cell phone or whatever. Changing track a tiny bit, what would you say are some of the most pressing health concerns that you're seeing in young adults with Down syndrome, say in their 20s and 30s?
So, I think, like for the rest of us, I think, exercise and activity, certainly weight management, those are some big things. So really trying to promote people to take good care of themselves and trying to give them the tools to be as independent as possible. Particularly as people become more independent, if all the direction has been from the outside, family or parents or whomever, and then they go to move, they move to their own place or whatever, and where that's going to be gone. It's it's sort of like the freshman 15 in college, where suddenly it's all that learning. It really wasn't learning. It was just forced. Not forced. That's a bad term, but where the incentive was not from within.
Yeah.
Like, one area that has really, I guess, seen an increase in attention is mental health care for adults with Down syndrome and other disabilities too. And I guess the first part of the question is, why do you think this area has been neglected for so long?
Well, I think probably for two reasons. I think it's been undertreated and underappreciated in all of us, across the board. So I think people with Down syndrome then just sort of get lumped into that lack of treatment, if you will, that so many people have had over the years. The second reason, more specifically for people with Down syndrome, I think there's a lot of lack of understanding. And I think one thing that's very different is that because of communication issues, many physical health problems or pain or other things that someone cannot express verbally end up being displayed in a behavioral or mental health, if you will, fashion. And so I think what we've seen is that if you don't appreciate that and just sort of treat that as a behavioral mental health without going back to appreciate or evaluate what the underlying physical health issue may be, you're not only going to miss a lot of things, which is unfortunate, but you're also much less likely to have success in treating the mental health issues. If someone's having pain from something and that's causing them to have a behavioral change, and you just treat the behavioral change without addressing the underlying painful issue, it's not as likely you're going to be successful.
And I think I've seen this with a few of our adults that come to mind, where they tend to sometimes internalize that feeling of depression or anxiety. So from outwardly, it seems like they're functioning fine, but it's just all so internalized and they have no way of really expressing what they're feeling.
I would agree. Our sense is even those folks that have good verbal skills, many or most of them have difficulty verbalizing mental health stress.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so sometimes actually the people that get in more trouble in some ways in that sense are those with good verbal skills, because we anticipate that they would be able to tell us.
Yeah.
And they're not able to tell us. And so we overlook perhaps that even more in them.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in relation, the second part of that same sort of question is, what should a parent or family member do if they're noticing something that they think is a mental health related change?
Yeah, so I think, there's several issues. One is you really want to, take your son or daughter, whoever it is, to your family doc or whoever your primary care physician is, and look for the medical things, and we want to look for the things that are more common to people with Down syndrome: the thyroid, the sleep apnea, the celiac, and those things that are more common that could affect somebody, how they feel physically, which ultimately could affect how they feel mentally as well, or how they display it mentally. Second thing is you really want to look at what's going on around the person. What are the social issues? What are the what's happening that may have contributed to this. I suspect that partially maybe because of their very strong memories, people with Down syndrome may be a little more susceptible to some post-traumatic stress issues because they have such strong visual memories of what happened. But the problem is that we often don't get what was the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the other piece of that is that, we tend to think of, in my era, it was the Vietnam War or the Iraq War or a horrific car accident. We tend to think of those things as post-traumatic. Trauma is really in the eye of the beholder. So what I may think is stressful, you may not, and what you do, I may not. And I think that's true for individuals with Down syndrome as well. So I think there may be something that we don't necessarily appreciate as stressful to the person. And so we want to take a look at that and see. And that could be something in school, that could be something at work. So we really have to try to sort through those things. Important. So physical and social. And then certainly you want to look at the mental health issues as well. And certainly it's helpful to have a provider that has some experience with people with Down syndrome to not only to make sure that we're looking at those first two and not just treating the mental health piece, but also then addressing the mental health issues as well. The one other issue that we've really started to take a look at are the sensory issues. We do think that people with Down syndrome, I think for a long time we thought of sensory issues as something you had or didn't have was like a yes or no. We've really become very convinced that it's probably a bell curve like most things in life. And some people are at one end of the spectrum or other, but most of us are somewhere in the middle. And some of our folks are one end or the other. And I think there are some sensory issues that do contribute to some of the behavioral changes and some sensory strategies that even if they don't really have, they're more in the middle and they don't have some pretty extreme sensory issues, they might benefit from some of the sensory techniques just to help them relax and get through the situation. So I think we really got to look at physical, mental, social, sensory, got to really look at all those things together to sort it out. And if we're not trying to do a full complement of that, we're often going to miss things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're saying really a siloed approach is absolutely not the one that you want to be taking for your adults with Down syndrome. Just looking up at one area is probably going to miss a big piece of the picture, at least one big piece of the picture.
Yeah, I think you not only miss things, and then that person will continue to have whatever discomfort that is from physical or mental or whatever, but you're also less likely to be successful in the treatment.
Yeah.
After, we're going to take a little ad break, and then after that, Hin is going to speak more or ask you a little bit more about some older adults with Down syndrome.
Show the world you love someone with Down syndrome. DSRF Down Syndrome Swag Shop is stocked with shirts, baby clothes, bags, and more. Whether you're looking for World Down Syndrome Day products, DSRF brand merchandise, or general Down syndrome items, we have what you're looking for. Love lives on 21st chromosome, and Down syndrome swag lives at dsrf.org/shop.
My name is Andrew. I am the photographer. Photos are my interest because I love scenes. It makes me feel very close to people. My photos cards are on my Etsy shop through Andrew's eyes at dsrf.org/Andrew. Don't forget to watch my video through Andrew's eyes on YouTube.
We're just back from our ad break, and Hin is going to talk a little bit more about older adults with Down syndrome.
So, Dr. Chicoine, as adults with Down syndrome move into their 40s and beyond, we unfortunately continue to see a high incidence of early onset Alzheimer's and dementia. What can families do when their loved one with Down syndrome is younger and in order to try to prevent this or at least slow down the onset?
So unfortunately, there's limited information we have on that now. It's again not been demonstrated in folks with Down syndrome, but we do know from the general population that exercise does seem to be an important important thing that may help either prevent or slow it down. There's a relationship between sleep apnea and Alzheimer's disease, so certainly making sure people are getting tested for that. Problem with sleep apnea, it when just watching someone sleep may not be a good sign of sleep apnea, so you may want to think about that. Anybody that has a change in function or a change in mental health or whatever, that's one of the things we talk about. Should we be getting a sleep study? And then just overall general good health. We want to make sure people stay as healthy as possible. There is some discussion about whether insulin resistance related to being overweight may contribute to Alzheimer's disease. I think, we don't have a final answer on that. There's lots of good reasons to be physically active, eat healthy, and try to stay your weight at a good, healthy weight. So if that's a possible benefit to reducing or preventing Alzheimer's disease, that would just be one more, feather in your cap for doing those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the sleep apnea part, I could not agree with you more, because I think as a team at DSRF, we're definitely making sure that we're having our parents become more aware of the fact that their kids need to get tested at a young age, because it is very difficult to get compliancy with a CPAP mask when our students get older. It's very, I think that's probably one of the biggest problems. The sleep study can all work out fine, but the compliancy to the CPAP mask is really tricky. So if we can kind of start a bit earlier, it does make a difference. Would you agree?
I would, and I think the other issue to that is, I hear a lot of concern that, well, this person could never comply with a study or a CPAP. Mm-hmm. I would encourage people not to give up until it's been tried, because we do have a lot of people that actually do. We're saying, oh, this would never happen, and they do it.
Absolutely.
And so, we clearly have people that can't, but that's true in those without Down syndrome as well.
Yeah. So. And you referred. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marla.
No, I was just going to add a comment that, in fact, none of the people that I have ever referred, and I refer everybody, not everybody gets their level 2 polysomnogram, but everybody who's ever had it gets that diagnosis of sleep apnea. Every single one. My tiny 4-year-olds, my teenagers, my adults, 100% have been diagnosed with sleep apnea, and often quite severe. So it is something that we would like to see addressed in early childhood, and absolutely by adulthood if it hasn't come up as a diagnosis earlier than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not known to be 100%, but it's pretty high. I don't know
high.
I don't know the number for sure, but it's a high number and worth taking a look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what happens is not everybody that I send for a referral actually gets that referral made, but certainly everyone who's gotten through that process has found out that diagnosis of sleep apnea, which is surprising, because some of my littler kids who don't demonstrate any overweight issues or anything like that, I'm surprised that they also have sleep apnea.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, certainly obesity increases your chance, but a lot of folks with Down syndrome who are at a normal weight still have sleep apnea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Dr. Chicoine, earlier you were mentioning about grooves and how there's unhealthy grooves and kind of wanting our adults to transition to healthier grooves. I do see that a lot of our population kind of gets stuck in there, whether it's a healthy or an unhealthy groove, they get stuck in a routinized, I'm thinking of one adult in particular where he has the same schedule every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And he's now in his 40s. And even if I attempt to suggest, hey, let's try this other activity, it's just like an immediate shutdown. So what would you say to parents out there that kind of are relying on their routine for their kids, but maybe not pushing them to kind of get out of it a little bit more when they're younger?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the groove can be a very positive thing in a lot of ways, but we do need to also build in some flexibility. And so, altering, and I think it does work, by the time some of our folks are adults and been doing some of these things for 20 years, it's going to be pretty hard to change that. So at a younger age, we would certainly encourage people to look at, building in some flexibility into the day and whether they, or into the schedule, so that maybe they do something a little, not every Monday night they do movie, but
Bowling
you
or
know,
whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Dr. Chicoine, from time to time, we read exciting news reports of research in this area. And can you tell us what progress is being made in identifying why so many people with Down syndrome develop dementia relatively early, and some of the efforts that are being made to address this issue?
So we do see that Alzheimer's disease does occur at a younger age and more frequently, and it is thought that the what's called the APP gene is chromosome 21, and because people have 3 of the chromosome 21, that there is more of this gene expression, and that does seem to, the general sense is that at this point that seems to contribute to earlier and more frequent Alzheimer's disease. I think that the very interesting thing is that there's lots of work going on that, and people looking at not only the what the effect of that gene is, but also all sorts of other issues with regards to how do you deal with the plaques and the changing the onset of the tangles and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of work going on. I'm an Edison guy. We've had a lot of failure drugs, but we're really looking for the one. I suspect ultimately it won't just be one. I suspect, like a lot of other conditions, that there may be a cocktail of things that we take.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you that are you guys aren't, but those of you that are my age, when I was in medical school, and I'm not comparing this, but it's fascinating to look at the timing comparison. When I was in medical school, we first started to hear about AIDS, HIV. And at that time, that was a terminal illness right from the beginning. And now really it's treated very much like a chronic disease, almost like you would treat hypertension or high blood pressure or heart disease. So there's a cocktail of medications that folks can take. So similarly, my hope is that we will see something similar in folks with Down syndrome or Alzheimer's in general, that there may be something that people take at a very young age to prevent it. There may be something take more in the 20s to 40s, that before people have symptoms, that we're already the brains are developing these plaques and tangles, medication or medications that people take in their 20s to 40s to kind of clear that out, if you will. And then, more after 40 on up into the later life, there may be more things that are done to when people have symptoms to treat. So I can see that there's maybe a potential range of medications that have taken over age or preventions. One of the exciting things for me is that, some people think that, the ultimate cure for Alzheimer's, the control of Alzheimer's disease, that there's a pretty fair chance that some significant breakthroughs will come through Down syndrome because of because of what we see of them are common. And so that's, I think that, are people studying Alzheimer's disease so they can benefit other people? Yeah, maybe some, but I don't care. Ultimately, people with Down syndrome are going to be well served by this, and I think it's going to be a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
can I just, sorry, Hannah,
no, go for it.
Ask a follow-up question? So for our listeners, just to make it absolutely clear, could you speak to a relationship, if there is one, we're not really sure in the research quite yet, between the buildup of plaques and tangles in the brain and sleep quality?
Yeah, I've not seen a definite cause, or there's definitely a link. I've not seen a definite reason, on a molecular or brain level why that occurs, but certainly chronic oxygen deprivation or low oxygen levels that are seen with people with sleep apnea certainly could be a candidate. Our brain needs to really have a sleep cycle and go through a normal sleep cycle with REM sleep and non-REM sleep, and it's a nice 8-hour pattern that we should go through roughly. And if we don't have that, then our brain does not get the restoration that it needs. So whether that has some indirect effect, I don't know that we have the answer to that. But it does seem clear that poor sleep certainly does seem to contribute to Alzheimer's disease, or certainly linked to Alzheimer's disease. And so, I think good sleep is also just like, healthy eating and exercise. There's lots of good things that come from good sleep. If it happens to be that it also helps prevent Alzheimer's disease down the road, that's an extra plus for that.
Okay, sorry, Hannah, I had to ask.
No. It's funny because I was I was actually going to ask a question along similar lines. You were mentioning earlier, Dr. Chicoine, about how we can start to see some of these symptoms of early onset Alzheimer's and dementia in our adults when they're in their 30s and 40s. And for our listeners that may not be fully aware, I mean, our population does age at an accelerated rate. I was wondering if you could just explain a little bit about why those symptoms come on or come on so early for them, as opposed to the population.
So onset of symptoms before 40 is thought to be fairly uncommon. The youngest person we diagnosed with Alzheimer's was 38, and that's about the only person I can think of who was in their 30s over a long period of time. And we've unfortunately served hundreds of people with Down syndrome who developed Alzheimer's disease just based on the numbers of people we have seen. So before 40 with symptoms is not common. So an average age of onset of symptoms is about 55 or 54. So it is typically later than that. But the thing with Alzheimer's disease that we now know is that the changes in the brain start occurring long before the symptoms. So there are some studies that have found people with Down syndrome, even in their 20s, or certainly in their 30s, that already have some of the changes in the brain. And that's true for the rest of us as well. That's not unique to Down syndrome, that people can have the changes in the brain long before they actually develop the symptoms.
Got it. Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you. And in recent years, life expectancy for individuals with Down syndrome has increased dramatically. What needs to happen to continue this trend, and not just to help people live longer, but to live longer with good health and a good quality of life?
Yeah. So again, when I actually had a great uncle that had Down syndrome. He was born in 1907. He actually lived to be about 40, which was very unusual in those days. But his life expectancy when he was born was only 9. And then again, when I graduated from medical school in 1984, life expectancy was about 28. And now it's about 60. So dramatic increase over that. If the rest of us had increased by the same percentage, we'd all be living to be about 350. So just a dramatic change in the life expectancy of folks with Down syndrome. Unfortunately, it does seem that it's probably plateauing at this point around 60. And unfortunately, Alzheimer's disease does seem to be the big issue. That really does seem to be the plateau. So really the next big step is how can we prevent and treat Alzheimer's disease successfully? That should have a significant benefit for people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Marla, did you have anything to add to that at all?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about, from a parent's perspective, that's kind of hard news to hear because we don't have that polymedical cocktail of drugs that would help see adults through that. But in terms of what is within their control, it sounds like just the absolutely regular preventative health measures that really all adults, regardless of diagnosis of Down syndrome or not, should be doing, which is exercising well and eating well and sleeping well. Is that kind of all that you would say is in the realm of control for families?
I think at this point, those are the things that we know. I think the other thing would be, I would encourage you to consider participating in a research study. I mean, that's the other thing that you can do. There's more and more of these studies being done, everywhere. I mean, States, Canada, Europe, lots of places. I would consider participating in a study because the more we can learn about this, the better chance we have of either preventing it or treating it. I think those are the things that that you can do. I think the other thing that's very exciting for me, for years I looked at it like, oh, this is a whole chromosome. This is going to be such a huge problem to try to fix a whole chromosome. But the folks that know a lot more about this than I do, really say now we're down to genes, and maybe it's 1 or 2 or multiple genes, but it's not. The sense is now, as they explain it to me, is it's not the whole chromosome, and so that's going to be not easy, but it's going to be less complex, if you will, hopefully to address treatments for this and prevention.
Great. Dr. Chicoine, I love the Facebook page that you guys have, the Adult Down Syndrome Center, and I urge everybody to follow it because it has so many great resources that are coming out all the time. Did you want to talk a little bit about anything new that's going on with the center, any new initiatives, projects that you'd like to talk about at all?
I think, the big thing that we've done in the last several months is upgrade our resource library. And I think that's, our goal is, when we started the clinic in 28 years ago, there was a sense that in the States there would be soon there would be a Down syndrome clinic in every state. And so 28 years later, there's 6 of them, or 7 or whatever it is. At this rate, we should have one in every state by about the year 2300. And so, that's not the solution. So I roughly estimate that, and it's just my estimation, but I roughly estimate less than 5% of people with Down syndrome in the United States have access to a clinic or get to a Down syndrome clinic. So most people are still cared for by their family physician or internist, whoever, adult wise. And so really our mission with this is to try to get information out for families, for people with Down syndrome, for providers that they can use in the care. I'm as a family physician by training, I'm a fan of local care. If you don't have to travel 300 miles to get care, that's a good thing. And so our goal is to try to get information into the hands of providers, wherever in their and a lot of it, I think the families will get the information and bring it to the provider rather than the provider bringing it to the family. But that's okay. That's a historic tradition in the Down syndrome community of very proactive families.
Yes, absolutely.
Bringing information to the physician.
Yeah.
I say 30 plus years ago, I was that doctor in a small town trying to take care of individuals with Down syndrome with no information. And so I get that completely. And that's something we'd really like to try to help people with. And then we got the other thing we're working on, I think is very exciting. We're working on a project with the University of Chicago that's looking at, we have access to some big data. And so we're really trying to look at what are the associated health problems, the co-occurring conditions in people with Down syndrome, which I think will really enlighten us with regards to the future of not only the healthcare guidelines, but on how to, when someone comes in with, a symptom, what are the likely causes of that versus the less likely causes. So I think that could really change healthcare as well.
Yeah.
And then we're working with LowMind on what's called Life DSR, which is a study really looking at the aging in people with Down syndrome, and ultimately will help us really in the next steps look at when we get to the point of doing clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, great. That's really great. Do you have any advice and you were alluding to this a little bit earlier about how a lot of the times the parents have to advocate and bring the information to the physicians and to the healthcare providers. And I have had many a conversation, and I'm sure Marla would agree. She's also had similar conversations with parents that are so frustrated that the doctors are not educated enough in the profile of Down syndrome, the medical profile. Do you have any words for the parents and even for us therapists that are helping advocate with the parents for our clients and into how to disseminate this information and really kind of, help our population out more?
I think, in the defense of the physicians, at least when I was in medical school, there was very little training about caring for adults with Down syndrome. Now then, there weren't as many adults with Down syndrome, but I think I'm still not sure that there's that much. I have a daughter that's graduated from medical school, and there really is not that much. So I think it's not that physicians necessarily are not interested. I think they're interested; they just don't have the information and never got the training. And like the rest of us, physicians don't like to look like they don't know the answer. So I think if we can provide them the information, and I teach in a residency program, and I tell residents that part of the job of a physician that I take as my responsibility is that there's an awful lot of stuff on the internet, much of it which is wrong or not beneficial. And really our job is to try to help glean through that and put it on our webpage and whatnot to share that. So I would encourage parents to also take part of that role, because the physicians, a physician that had one patient is probably, if he's got one patient with Down syndrome and one patient with, something else, and one patient with something else, they're obviously not going to have the time to devote to it that I do.
Yeah.
And so, that's where we're trying to summarize that for people, and then families can really bring that to them.
You're absolutely right. I had a great conversation with the physician of one of my students a few weeks ago, and he said, I have 1,000 people on my caseload, and this particular student is the only one with Down syndrome. And he was actually asking me, where do you find the right guidelines? And it's easy to find them, so I just sent them his way. But I think that is really the core of the issue, especially healthcare in Canada is organized a bit differently, and there is less specialization, so we have to kind of make our own. It's more difficult to make referrals. So you're less likely to end up with one physician who sees 50 people with Down syndrome even,
Mm-hmm.
because you kind of are limited to go to whoever's in the neighborhood, especially when it comes to specialists. You just got to go to whoever's at Children's that day, kind of thing.
Well, although, I mean, you know, Canada has some pretty amazing information that's out there too. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think there's some great information that comes out of Canada on caring for people with Down syndrome. But I think my goal would be, we'd want people not to have to go
Mm-hmm.
to a Down syndrome clinic as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want to get the information in the hands of the providers locally, so the family doesn't have to drive 300 miles or wherever the case may be. Yeah, and so or
in case
fly.
Of Canada, yeah.
In case of Canada. So I think, you know, those are things that, and I think families will do that. I mean, actually, when we are the funder of our webpage, our resource library asked, so, you know, so we do all this. How do you know that information is going to get in the hand of physicians? And because physicians traditionally, you know, particularly if they got one or two people, may not go looking for it. And I said, well, I happen to be in a great Down syndrome community that really has a historical tradition of getting the information from the parents to the physician. So, trust the families.
Trust the families, exactly. Yeah. Dr. Chicoine, it was an absolute pleasure. We've had the honor of listening to you present, but it's really fun to talk to you in person. Yeah. So Marla and I were very excited to chat with you because we're very geeky in that respect. We love that. I just feel like the medical component is so important for our population. So I'm so happy to have you on, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And we hope to have you back for another episode soon.
Thank you. I'd love it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Take
pleasure.
care of yourself, and all right. Thank you so much.
Well.
Bye-bye now.
Next week on the Lowdown, a Down syndrome podcast.
I'm going to get a little technical here for a second, a little OT nerdiness here. But as occupational therapists, we typically follow what's known as a PEO model. So P stands for the person, E for the environment, and O for the occupation. So as OTs, this is a really good visual that I also use in presentations when I'm speaking to teachers, SEAs, and parents, but it kind of gives you a guideline of how to create goals for our students and how to help them learn. And optimal performance will occur when there's a really good balance between the person, the occupation, and the environment. So when all of those factors are taken into consideration, we can really see some learning and some growth.
The Lowdown, the Down Syndrome podcast, is a production of Down Syndrome Research Foundation. Learn more at dsrf.org and join the conversation at DSRF Canada on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The Lowdown is hosted by Marla Fodan and Hannah Mahmood, and is produced by Glenn Hughes. The Lowdown theme music and George Dew was written and recorded by Rick Scott.